Alright guys, welcome to another V3 Visuals video. In this video, we are going to be having a discussion about this guy here. This is the cheapest cinema camera that Sony makes. This is the Sony FX30. I have been using this as my main camera actually for the past month or so. After this will be my B camera, and I'll be using it alongside my A camera, which is the Sony A7 IV that we're using to film this right over here. But Nav and Love have compiled a few questions together to get a discussion going about some key points about this camera for someone who's looking to purchase it in 2025. So without any further ado, let's just dive right in, guys. What questions do you guys have?
So what I want to know when I'm buying a camera is, are the main benefits worth the buy? So we got a few questions here. The FX30 obviously has some super standout main benefits. So me and Love compiled some questions about them and about some of the main gripes that someone might have switching to a video-only camera.
Yeah.
And so we'll just dive right into it. The first question I have, we're on a run and gun team. Is the rolling shutter performance really that much better?
Yeah, so one thing I'm going to talk about a lot in this video is you guys are going to notice I'm going to be comparing it a lot to my main camera, which is the full frame A7 IV. Mm-hmm. And that is one of my biggest issues that I have with the A7 IV, is that the rolling shutter on it is terrible. On this guy, the rolling shutter is improved. It's somewhere in the middle. It's not as good as your A7S III or something like an FX3, but it is better than my A7 IV. It's kind of somewhere in that middle ground there. Our beginner versus pro videographer video, I shot that. That was actually the first day that I had the FX30. I shot that entirely handheld, run and gun on the FX30. And if you watch that, you guys maybe notice I was purposely really making it super active and kind of trying to film it in the sort of comedic way. Mm-hmm. But that was mainly just to check the stabilization, which we're going to get into later, but also the rolling shutter on it. And I will say it's pretty, it's good. It's good. Yeah. It's not an issue.
Okay. Yeah. So Love, if you want to dive into the next question we have here.
Sure. I think the next question, I think it's the most important one, because that would be the main reason for you to buy the second camera is 4K 120. What do you think about that?
Yep.
And yeah, we went out to Brackendale and Squamish for the eagle season. They're feeding on the salmon there. So we went there, shot some 4K 120. It's pretty solid. I will say initially when I looked at it on paper, because this is already an APS-C crop sensor camera, so it's a 1.5 times crop from a full frame, there's actually an additional crop on the 4K 120. It's essentially a 2.43 times crop from a full frame sensor on that 4K 120. So initially I thought that was going to be a really big deal, and that still is something to consider, that there is the 1.5 times crop from APS-C and there's an additional crop on the 4K 120. But for our testing, it worked out quite well because we were doing wildlife. We were using the 150 to 600. It was giving us, even more than 900 millimeters. So for us, it actually worked out well. I think the footage is amazing. The 4K 60s on it's great. If you really need that 4K 120 for some super fast action or wildlife, I think it's pretty solid. I think it's not going to be as good as something like the A7S III, which we are going to have a video coming up on that, on how the A7S III holds up in 2025. Yeah. It's not as good as something like that, but it's pretty solid. I will say my expectations were lower, so I was pretty impressed.
I think the thing I would be most concerned with is like when you see like a 2.43x crop is what is that what it is?
Yeah.
So when you see that on paper, that looks like really bad.
Yeah.
Right? To a videographer, that would be like, oh, okay. Is the quality really affected by it? Like I might be concerned with how much light the actual camera lets in. How was it using that in daytime?
In our limited testing with it, we were able to get pretty solid footage. Mm-hmm. That is just something to keep in mind, though, that crop, the way it's going to affect the light. I think the way I would treat it is that it's great that it's on here, and it's a great add-on to an amazing camera. Just take that into consideration, that there is a crop, and you have to be mindful about that and what lenses you're using. You can definitely make it work, though. Even indoors, you can definitely make it work. It's pretty solid, I will say.
All right, all right.
Yeah.
So let's dive in straight to the next one. This is one I'm really interested in. Sony has the Steady Shot Active, the Steady Shot Standard on all of their bodies, well, most of them, at least the ones that we've used in our testing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit different on some cameras though. The FX30 is supposedly known for its ability to have like a really run and gun setup.
Yeah.
How is the stabilization performance? Because we don't use any gimbals, so you can really see how is it? Is it good? Is it better?
Yeah. Mostly in our run and gun setups, we just have the cameras rigged up. We use the top handle, side handle, just for the convenience and speed of it. Steady shot has always been some like a weakness in Sony cameras, but Gerald Undone has a video actually on the FX30 and how this is like a standout from the lineup, that it has pretty solid stabilization. And again, this is the body of an FX3 with the smaller APS-C sensor.
Yeah.
So on this one, I actually, because I heard of how good it is, I feel like my expectations were a bit higher. And so it's not bad. It is that, like, that was one thing I really didn't like on my A7 IV, is that it was the rolling shutter and the stabilization. Two biggest things where I feel like the A7 IV could really improve on.
Yeah.
And this, it is better. The stabilization is better, for sure. Using this run and gun, I'm going to pick this up and not my A7 IV. But it's not, maybe it was just my expectations were way too high, but it's not anything insane, like you don't ever need to use catalyst browse ever again or anything like that. It's not crazy, but it is, out of the cameras we've tested, I think it does have the best stabilization.
Well, we'll go for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
As you mentioned, this is the cheapest cinema body that Sony makes.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the pros and cons for this body?
Yeah, this body in specific, like I actually just mentioned, this is the body of the FX3. It's actually identical. This half cage that I have on it fits on the FX30 and the FX3. There are a few negatives about the body that I like when I was looking into buying the camera. I thought they were going to bother me a lot more, and now actually being with this for a month, I will say I like the cinema body a lot. So the grip is solid here. It's definitely a better grip than on my A7 IV. The grip is really solid. You get things like the internal fan. So again, someone who's like purchasing, they're thinking about purchasing something like an A6700, right? It's the same sensor as the FX30, but the biggest difference is you're paying for this cinema body. I've done some testing. My A7 IV would get pretty warm after about 45 minutes to an hour of filming. I've done very similar testing on this, and it's just stays at regular temperatures. It's good to know that I can just leave it running and not ever have to worry about overheating. So the internal fan's really good. But the biggest thing that I like about the cinema body, I think it's the tally lights. I don't know. I just think they look super cool. When I press that record button, the tally lights, it just lights up. I think it's really sick. I feel like just those things together make this more worth it than the A6700. Mm-hmm. Now, the one thing that the A6700 has that this doesn't is the viewfinder, which, again, this is not a hybrid camera. I wouldn't say, if you're planning on like doing photos with this camera, buy the A6700. If you want a hybrid camera, buy the A6700. This is strictly a video only camera, and so I've noticed that I haven't missed the viewfinder too much. I have my phone mounted here as a monitor, and it's been great. There are other benefits to the cinema body, having the ability to mount stuff on it without needing a cage. If I'm being honest, I still have my half cage on it. So yeah, other small things, the record button on top. There's also a record button over here. I also have my shutter button set to the record button. I don't really know if you need 3 buttons set to the record button, but it's just nice to have, I guess. If I find something better to set them as, I'll do that. The joystick on top, I don't know, it's a mixed bag with this. It takes me some time to get used to. I still naturally, the joystick on my A7 IV is over here where my thumb goes. So I feel like sometimes I'm reaching to that. And this one's on the top. But when I hold it like this and I'm looking down and filming, then I feel like the joystick being over here has been really good. So I think the cinema body is really good. that was something that I didn't think was going to be that big of a deal going into this, and now I will say I really like this body a lot. So
Would you think like adding a fan into the body makes it bulky and not easy to handle?
um it is quite fat. Like this is literally fatter than my A7 IV. But I don't know. I feel like the size of this is really solid. It's helped with like deepening the grip. This also has the same batteries from all the full frame Sonys. I feel it's pretty solid. I think it's worth the trade off to have the cooling. The fans are super quiet. I don't even hear them. If you're worried about them being heard in the video or anything like that, you can't hear them in the video. So I feel like that's pretty solid.
So the last question here is something that you guys would probably have the most concerns with. This is always a talk. All the camera community talks nonstop about this. Is the APS-C look good? How does it compare to the full frame? You have the A7 IV, as you've mentioned, as your main body there. Does this look different? Is it good? Is it comparable? What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like that's the main talk, especially when someone spending a lot of money on a camera. Full frame versus APS-C. Should I invest in full frame lenses? Is it a waste to invest in APS-C lenses? And like our first cameras were Sony A6400s, and I feel like for video they are such amazing cameras. In photos, I have definitely noticed there are times we're very blessed to have super fast lenses. We like shooting at f1.2, f1.4, and in the photos the bokeh is crazy. But when we shoot video, majority of the time we're shooting at like f2.8, f2, and going into this, that was one thing where I felt like, oh, I'm moving from full frame to APS-C. How's it gonna feel? And I will say, for video, if I'm being honest, majority of the time, I can't tell the difference. Now, keep in mind, there is one thing. I was using full frame glass with this. I was not using APS-C lenses, so I'm using pretty high end full frame glass, and that's also a benefit. There is you can save money and get much more affordable APS-C lenses. But anyways, I've been using full frame glass, and majority of the time I'm able to adjust my aperture and go fast enough to get the same look that I want to use on full frame, and it's been very hard to tell the difference. The footage that comes out of here looks very solid. If you're doing any sort of client shoots, weddings, YouTube, social media, whatever it is, this camera is more than enough. With that said, in low light, sometimes when we're in the auditorium, it's a bit dark. There are times where you can tell. That's what you're going to get with that sensor size, is it is a smaller sensor. It is an APS-C sensor. So there's only so much data that it can collect compared to a full frame. But majority of the time and majority of the use cases and how we've been using it, I haven't been able to tell much of a difference. I think the video that's coming out of this looks amazing.
Yeah, so all in all, we think that if you are someone who wants to spend that extra $2,000 or whatever it is between the FX30 and the FX3, if you want to spend that extra money on things like lighting, and you're not a hybrid shooter, maybe you're starting a YouTube channel, maybe you're starting short films, you're in school for videography, things like that. FX30 is a great buy. You can keep in mind a lot of like actual movie productions will still use the APS-C or Super 35 look. So I mean, you mentioned this. If you're not a hybrid shooter, this is it's a great camera. We've shot many reels with this for businesses and things like that, and they look like, if you look at them, like you would not be able to tell that that's from a APS-C lens.
We had that Christmas reel, and we had it up to like f1.4, which is like whatever f2.1 equivalent, and the bokeh coming from the lights, it looks. To me, it looks great. It actually gives that full frame bokeh look. So people think, oh, if you won't need better bokeh, you have to go full frame. It really just depends on the lenses, and that extra savings. Like the FX3 is what, like almost double the price of this, and it's the same body. You get the same features. Like the features on this, I haven't even mentioned it, but shutter angle has been amazing on this. Cine EI has been great. There's a lot of video centered features on this camera. They've been great. So all the same features from the FX3 get passed down here. The two biggest differences would probably be that The FX3 is full frame, and the FX3 has better rolling shutter performance. It's gonna be better in low light.
Yeah.
So is that worth like double the price? A lot of people purchasing this are probably going to be comparing it to either a little bit more expensive, which is the A7 IV going full frame, or going a little bit cheaper and going A6700. And the place where I feel like this fits right in the middle is the fact that you get those video centered features that you don't get on the 6700, you don't get on the A7 IV. You have good stabilization, you have pretty solid rolling shutter performance. I feel like this camera is honestly a really good deal, because when we were talking about this the other day, when we had the A6400s, those were our starter cameras. Those were the first mirrorless cameras we bought, and they were solid for social media, but there were some things that camera couldn't do. Right, and we were talking about that, like
it didn't have the flip screen, it didn't have the software, and it really didn't have great grip, it didn't have the premium feel.
The battery life wasn't as good. It can't do 10-bit color. The rolling shutter wasn't as good, so there were a few things missing.
Oh, the rolling shutter was bad.
Yeah, the rolling shutter was quite bad on the A6400. But this camera, for the price, I feel like it does everything. It literally can do everything that you need. So the only thing is it just comes back down to that, full frame versus APS-C. And like I said, if you're doing video only, I don't think it's the biggest deal. And I would rather save your money and pass on those savings to higher quality glass.
Well, that's it for this video, guys. Stay tuned for more. As we said, the A7S III video is also on the way, and we'll have lots more coming this year. 2025 we're planning on it being a big year for us. So press that subscribe button, hit that like button on this video. Let's get those. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, your brother, your sister, whoever it is. Send this video to them. If they're interested in buying a camera, an FX30, make sure that they see this video. And we'll see you guys in the next one.